do a little introduction, just quickly, and then we'll go through um, lessons learned. I needed to have Angie on this call to be letting people in the waiting room. So I'm learning as we go. So bear with me.
You
Um,
might have to watch that throughout the entire thing.
yeah, I know. So I'm going to put this up on my other screen so I can make sure I can see all your faces on here in the morning, Daryl. So, and I have you guys muted in the chat today when we get towards the end of the webinar. If you have questions for Ron or Jose, you can just throw them up in the chat and we'll try to field as many as we can. I am recording this. So for those who are only able to jump on for a while, or if somebody misses it later on, we can go through this. But wanted to thank you for all being here today. Again, we're really looking at that challenging opportunity, which is how do you pass the baton to the next generation? And so it's something that, we all will have to deal with. There's a book called Finish Big, and Ron's a fan of it. And part of that book says, every entrepreneur exits. So sometimes willingly, sometimes unwillingly. And so we have to be prepared, I think, for that exit. So that's really our purpose today is just to encourage you all and equip you, hopefully, to consider things that as you're working in the business, you might be challenged to work a little bit more on the business. So let me open this up with a word of prayer. We'll do a quick round the whatever this thing is, Zoom call, I guess. There's about 15 or 16 of us on here. So let me pray for us. Lord, I thank you for this opportunity to just fellowship together over the internet and pray, Lord, that you'd stir our hearts to consider those things by your Spirit that you're calling us to do, Lord, as we lead organizations and want them to continue beyond the time we're on this earth, because ultimately we want them to glorify you for the long run. And so use Ron and I and Jose's conversation today to just stir us and challenge us and encourage us, I pray. In Jesus' name, amen. So let's see if I can. Okay, Mr. Webster's online. So I have everyone muted except for Ron and Jose. But if you want to, let's see. I want to go around real quick since there's just probably what 16 of us on here. It shouldn't take too long. Just quickly introduce yourselves. I'm seeing Tim and Brian up on my screen on the right hand side. You guys want to unmute and just share?
Good morning. I'm Tim Geisels from Millennium Metals. We're a faith-based metals and plastic supplier. And
Right. Camp.
this is the CEO.
And I said this is a leadership series, and one after another series, we're going to be interviewing Tim and Brian because they're passing the baton right now too. So thank you guys for being on here. All right, Joey, you're the next one up.
Joey Savek out of Lexington. I have privilege of running a real estate and construction business down here.
All right, and just Tim and Brian are C12 members. Joey's a C12 member in the Northern Kentucky group. Now I'm looking at Brian Hutchison. Brian.
So I'm Brian Hutchison, lead a company that manufactures paper tubes in Northern Kentucky.
All right, Brian's in our Northern Kentucky group as well. Believe it's is it Kyle Whalen?
Yes, Kyle Whalen. I'm from Lexington also. I got a small remodeling company. We just converted to an ESOP about 4 years ago.
Oh, that's great. Thanks for joining us, Kyle.
Thank
All
you.
right. Well, John Neff, if you came to a session planning seminar a few years ago, John was our guest speaker. So, John, introduce yourself.
Yes, my name is John Neff. I'm kind of an interested bystander, perhaps. Uh, I grew up in a family business, so the whole idea of succession is one that really interests me, and chatted with Ron and Randy a few times in the past, so happy to be included.
Great to have you. Actually, Ron's originally the one that introduced me to John. So, Doug Borchers.
Hi, everybody. Doug Borchers. I'm just like John. I'm new to the group. I'm president of a company called Superior Aluminum Products, north of Dayton, and we are about a year and a half from our succession. Randy graciously invited me to the session today, and I'm looking forward to learning a lot of things.
Great to have you, Doug. Mike Twist, one of our members, you guys know, introduced me to Doug a while back. They did a project together. So, and this young man is special to me because he is married to my daughter. Joe, you want to introduce yourself?
Hey everybody, yeah. So I'm Randy's son-in-law. I'm a commercial insurance broker for Hub International, and I'm just want to be a fly on the wall, just to hear the stories. And it's a big thing in our industry right now as well. People going through the succession plan. So just wanted to hear the insights.
Great to have you, Joe. It's a little early in California, but Daryl Geis.
Hello, everybody. Yeah,
Daryl.
Daryl Geis. I lead the Christian Blue Pages, digital and print Christian business directory on mission to rally the body of Christ and supporting one another, and doing that for over 3 decades. So I figured this was a pretty good session to be a part of.
Great, Daryl. Thanks for having you. Um, Michael Webster. Oh, Mike, you're still muted. Let's see.
There we go.
There we go.
All right. Hey, everybody. Mike Webster, Franklin, Ohio, just south of Dayton, north of Cincinnati. I started a commercial flooring business with my wife over 30 years ago, and moved into the residential somewhat in epoxy coatings and concrete polishing. We are 2 years into succession planning, a young guy coming in that will eventually take over the company at some point. No time frame on when I actually leave yet.
And Mike is the OG of the OGs. He was the first C12 member 18 years ago. So thanks for jumping on board, Mike. And then let's go Todd Hayes. Todd, great to have you with us.
Yeah, this is my first meeting, and I have an office in Trenton, Hayes Insurance and Financial Services, work with State Farm. And then my wife, she's not here with us at the moment, but she owns Belco, which is Pump It Up, kids' birthday parties, and jumpy place in Westchester.
All right. Oh, yeah, we know that place. Been there. So thanks for attending today, Todd. And then Dave Watkins, another old timer. Doesn't look like an old timer, but he started C12 in his 20s. So
Been around the C12 table for a long time. David Watkins, Watkins Heating and Cooling. We do residential air conditioning between Dayton and Cincinnati. I did a successful succession for my dad about 10 years ago. But even though I'm the successor, there will be time for me to fade into the background in the future. So
all right.
always interested to hear from Ron.
Yes.
And Jose. Haven't seen Jose in a long
Yeah.
time.
They know Jose from way back. So, and then Krista, are you able to unmute? I know your camera's not on, but if not, we can. Krista's a member in our Northern Kentucky group, and presently she leads Riverside Electric, and is kind of in this baton passing with her father, and they're a multi-generation Cincinnati company. So we have a lot of those. So, but I think that's all we have on here right now. Like I said, we'll have maybe others joining, but we got it recorded. So I'm just going to jump right in and ask Ron in terms of a little bit of background in terms of like Ron, even though we're going to be talking about Ron and Jose, actually, Ron was the successor from Levon, the founder of FTI. And so, like Ron, as you think about this, when you joined the organization, did you think and envision one day that you were going to be the leader of this organization? Like even growing up, did you think you'd ever lead something as large as FTI?
I guess I really did. I don't know. I just watched Shark Tank and all that stuff. I'm an entrepreneur at heart. And so I had worked for the big guys, Northrop Grumman coming out of college. I loved it. And the interesting thing is they kept saying I was good at what I was doing, but the HR system threw too many roadblocks at somebody that didn't have advanced degrees and all that stuff. So when I got married after 4 years of working for the big guy, I just wanted to try small and be entrepreneur. And so went to a 10-person company. It was an 8A minority owned with the government that helps. We grew it up to about 800 over 10 years. I was running a third of it. And so when I came to FTI, yeah, I think I really did. It was about 15 people. I thought I could grow it like we had grown the prior company. And I knew the owner's age was different than mine. The biggest thing I think that gave me faith in that was I felt like I had a really good person I was working for. He was my friend. He was my, business mentor. He was my faith mentor. I just trusted everything about him. And so, it's not hard to have high expectations when there's only 15 people. Do you know what I mean? Yeah, I thought I could run it, and yeah, I thought we could grow it like we had done the prior one. So, I think part of that's just being an entrepreneur. Most of the guys on the call are probably that perspective as well. So we always have an urge to do more and more. And sometimes entrepreneur is also thought of as risk taker. And yeah, I was comfortable taking risk.
All right. I'm going to actually kind of pose the same thing back to Jose in terms of a little bit of your career journey prior to joining FTI. And then from being hired back in 2018, did you envision at that point that it was on the radar that you were going to be leading FTI?
So I have a pretty boring background. So an accountant, bachelor in accounting, CPA.
There you go.
Kind of worked my way through that and realized that I wanted to kind of know how the business operate, right? As opposed to reporting. I've had the benefit of the pleasure of the blessing, I guess, better said, to work at small companies. And by small companies, I mean, I don't know, 50 to 100, but typically in the 100 to multi-hundreds, all the way to the global multi-billion-dollar company. We were in Reno, Nevada when we started this process. So to answer the question, did I thought about this? No. I was looking for a good place. We had some personal health issues going in the house, so we needed to kind of move. And I was looking for a place that was close to good medical. But obviously, I was looking for a company that I could see myself growing and doing. What enticed me about FTI was it kind of scratched an itch for me where I was going to be able to lead more than just finance, right? I had HR, I had IT, and so that was exciting to me. So that was kind of the process of me going there. I don't want to jump ahead of me. I don't want to jump ahead, but
Yeah, because I have that other questions come like how was in that process, how was God confirming like his plan? Like obviously there's more opportunity, it sounds like, than just accounting. But some of the that attracted you.
Yeah, that's why I wasn't sure if I wanted to jump ahead because ultimately that was the deciding factor. And when I think about kind of where I'm at today and kind of post-mortem, there has to be trust. So without trust, in our case, it became quickly apparent during the first interview that Ron and I had something in common, right, which was God. And it was just subtle things, right? We just through little things we kind of knew. We kind of kept talking. And then that became a focus point, although I'll tell you, Ron and I don't talk a ton about Christianity. We just know that it's there. We know that we have to operate. We know that it's real. So we don't sit there and pray before our meetings and stuff like that. Now we're in a different environment than probably most of you, right? We can't do a lot of the things that they do as teachers that other people at C12 can do. I don't think we can do, given that who our customers are, right? And given the regularization. But it became apparent that we both believe in God. at that point, and that was the probably the underlying aspect of trust, right? And that throughout what I would say the 7 years, that has been the number one thing I can point to, always point to is trust, right?
So early on, like even in the interview process, what were some other factors that actually, built that trust in terms of, I mean, it's a big move, right? You're coming from Nevada back to Dayton. Like, was there something about the core values or what was, and were you even looking at the time or did they reach out and find you?
I was looking,
Okay.
so I knew I was going to find a job. I was interviewing, so I was definitely looking. It became what I would say a God blessing, right? It was obvious that God was a believer. I mean, that Ron was a believer, and that just grew. But also Tom Batty, who played a part into this, and I'm not sure how much you know Randy Tom Batty.
I've met him, yeah.
He wasn't as shy as Ron was with the or I wouldn't say shy, but I'm going to use that word for now. So I knew Tom was a believer. So that became apparent. What also became apparent that the company was going through a growth uh, uh, projections, rather that the company felt pretty good about it.
Mhm.
So you kind of add all those pieces of it, of somebody that ultimately I would be able to trust, that had the same baseline as I do, right? With the where the company was going, and that was what I would say an attractive proposition.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because you got to have the trust, but like for those of us who are like, okay, successor, there also has to be what I heard is, a future that there's growth entailed, right? Like, so, if it was stagnant or declining, it's not all that attractive to be coming in. You might have the trust, but, you got to have, sell the future. Um,
Yeah, I think it. So I mean, I can only provide you my perspective. It varies, right?
yeah.
It really depends on the stage. If the company was going through a transition, I probably wouldn't like that as much as growing, just because of the change management and the aspect of putting your stamp. So
Mm.
I think that matters. What it was clear to me was the direction that the company was going,
Mhm.
uh, and that was exciting. What was also clear to me was who Ron was early on, right? And that was exciting as well, and that provided comfort. In my case, not to sound arrogant, I had choices, right? But I, I, I quickly understood that FTI was where I wanted to be.
Yeah.
And that doesn't happen if I thought Ron was a bad guy, right? That makes sense.
Yeah, great. Hey, so Ron, if you go back 8 years ago, like what prompted your search for Jose coming to FTI? Was it I'm out looking for a successor? What was?
I don't think, I mean, I don't know that I would say I was interviewing for a successor. I was interviewing for someone to help the company. Yeah, Jose is going to be kind because he still works for me, but jokingly, we used to run the company with what was called Schroeder spreadsheets. Here's an engineer who has spreadsheets that are color coded, all that kind of stuff. That's how our finances flowed through. Um, and that worked well for a 20-person company. At the time, we were 100 plus or whatever, and it wasn't working. I didn't understand really the rules of banking and the taxes. I was talking to other people. And so I think you could you could go out and hire somebody as a comptroller or something like that to take over the finances and make it more mature. But if you are confident in your growth, instead of just hiring for what your needs are today, you look into the future, whether it's 2 or 3 or 4 years out, and you start hiring for that. Um, and when I listen to Jose, he'll downplay himself. He'll talk about the small business he had worked for and stuff like that, which there had been a few of. But he was working for a major corporation in Sierra Nevada, which is a multi-billion-dollar defense company. And he worked as finance directly for the two owners of the company. And so, I think I even talked about I was just looking for somebody who had already been where I wanted to go. And all I want you to do is take us to where you've already been, and I'll give you ownership or partial ownership to do that. And so, the bond that developed, I have to do the one line because we joke about it, but he's trying to do all the right things. He's the interviewee. I'm just kind of having a discussion. I don't really think of it as much as an interview as a joint discussion. What can I answer for him and vice versa? But he's so proactive. And one of his comments was, yes, but what do when you go to bed at night and you're losing sleep, what is it that is causing you to lose sleep? Because he's going to come be the hero and fix that problem for me. And he'll quote me on that. I looked at him and kind of went, I sleep pretty well. And I don't think he expected that answer. But I think that's partially faith and other aspects that we both jointly have. I think he could help a great deal in the area we were in. I was giving him some expansion. I had been mentored by the prior owner, and I had another business guy in the Dayton community that helped mentor me a lot on these areas. And so I just tried to be smart enough to do what they told me. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. So, so then, you hire Jose, and if anyone who knows you's been sitting around your C12 table or even visited your second Wednesday group knows you're a data-driven guy in terms of that's what you guys do. You look at data, inform your customers about data. So can you give me some of those key data points about Jose and his leadership as he came into the organization, that truly, gave you the convincing trust to say, hey, I think Jose is more than just, the person over our HR and finance.
Yeah, I've said it to a few in our group or whatever. The difference between a lifestyle business and a robust business is a maturity, an intent of the organization or whatever. And I think through some of my mentoring via Clay Mateel and stuff like that, I think one of the comments that I always took to heart is have the courage to hire somebody that you'd be willing to work for,
Mm,
not work with, but work for. And he's shy and other stuff along those lines, but he understood the financial side of it way better than I did. He understood the banking side of it way better than I did. Meanwhile, here's this guy that when I hired him, I thought of him as a CPA, et cetera, going to Harvard for classwork on strategic planning and other aspects. Because in a more robust business, your finance department has to understand the entire strategic intent of the company and know how to work within that, et cetera. So he's giving us variables to, key performance indicators that we should be looking at that we weren't beforehand and stuff like that. I just enjoyed watching him evolve the company to that next level of clarity.
that's great. So then, Jose, back to you. If you look at your journey these last 8 years, um, what has kind of given you the confidence to step up and be that CEO? And if you recall in C12, Jose's in our Florida group in Orlando in C12. A few months ago, we talked about the imposter syndrome, and I don't know, Jose, if that's anything that you could relate to. I know many of us did, but what do you think about your development and uh, what are some of the key things, that steps along the way that's given you that confidence?
Then I'm going to go back. I'm going to keep saying this, and I'm going to sound like a broken record. To me, it comes down to trust.
Okay.
I knew that Ron had the trust, and maybe he didn't have the trust day one, day two, whatever. But if you don't have the trust, right, then that's going to be problematic. On the other side of it, to kind of get in a little deep, right? When I came in, my biggest challenge going into working for a smaller organization, because even FTI was 100 million, it was much smaller than what, I mean, we sneezed at Sierra Nevada and it was 100 million, right? It was that kind of, so coming in and knowing that I kind of was going to be the expert, but I still had to make sure that business was going to be conducted, right? And not to overwhelm the system was part of the transition. As I kind of grew through that, it was a mix of understanding the business, right? That quickly evolved into understanding the business, growing under a certain model, and understanding what Ron wanted, right? And what was important to Ron. So I will give you an example. I tell this to people, like, Ron is forgiving, sometimes too compassionate. But I know that if I do something that violates one of the core values of the business, then I'm probably going to have tons of problems, right? So I knew that much. I also knew that we weren't going to get ahead by cheating, by lying, by stealing, right? So those basic foundations were there. Then it was more of just recognizing that the business was growing and that the infrastructure was going to change, and it's something that I had a desire to do. So from that perspective, I already had that desire. The company had the need. Ron had the trust on me, and I'll say this because I talk about trust on he trusts one way right now, but I'd say I wouldn't leave my kids. For those that know me quite well, I wouldn't leave my kids with anyone. Like I usually fly my mom in or somebody in from the Dominican Republic, and that was true in Nevada, right? So it was a long flight. I would leave my kid with Ron and Sue, right? So it's that kind of level of trust that we have. Uh, Understanding that and working through it, right? I ultimately knew that I had to do my job, whatever my job was. But if I had to check that box. So if I would have came in and not checked the box of the finance or whatever was asked, uh, I don't think we're sitting here in this group. So what I would say to you, understanding, making sure that it's clear uh, what that person is going to be responsible for, or the accountability, right? I think is important. That was clear to me.
Yeah.
Right. The other
And
aspect
Randy,
of this will
Randy, I will add what doesn't come across from the beginning of this conversation, and it really, I saw it when I interacted a little bit with John Neff and others, in that the complexities of families cause transitions to occur in family-run organizations, and yet you don't have a choice to change that momentum. In my case, while you could say I hired Jose and was I hiring my follow-up leader or whatever else, I hired several people throughout this process, many of which who came in, did pretty well, and thought they were lined up to be the next. I hate to say it because it sounds egotistical. It's not that, but the next Ron or the next leader or whatever else. And what I can tell you is in those scenarios, after I watched them, um, it was never the right one. Um, the egos, how they treated people, what they prioritized, etc. Um, I had the chance to be with them on a day by day basis while they were asking, can I be the president? Can I be the whatever? And recognize um, I wouldn't do that to the employees. That's the wrong leader. And so some of those leaders were asked to leave or transitioned out, etc. But I had, the first row ticket to watching Jose, how he treated people, how people respected him, communication styles, etc. And all you had to do was watch that, and it built your confidence up more and more that he was the right next leader.
Yeah.
I would say something on that. That doesn't mean that I didn't walk into Ron's office at time really upset and say, "Hey, Ron, if you don't control that person, I'm going to choke him." So there were times where I'm like, "Okay, I just messed up," right? But I had that early on. I had that trust that I can go in, even though I knew after I said it, it was a mistake. I should have never went into my bosses and says I can't deal with somebody else's personality, right? Because that doesn't send the right message when you're trying to run a company, if that makes sense.
Yeah. Well, and hopefully it was because you're trying to defend and be a promoter of the culture, the four C's. And if this person was not, was a culture buster rather than being somebody who would have to defend the culture, I think that's key. What you guys remind me of is in First Timothy 3, when you're choosing a leader in the church, it says, hey, if somebody desires that work, that's great. But these are the list of character that they have to have if they're going to lead well. And then it says at the end, but let them first be tested. And so I kind of heard with Ron saying, I got to watch him. I think one opportunity would be if I'm trying to have succession, but I do it too quickly, I don't have the chance to watch. and I'm going to rush something, just like if Ron, you were desperate and I had to make this transition in a year, and some of these people that appeared on the outside in their resume to fit, if you didn't have the opportunity to watch, that could have been, disastrous. So, um, what I'm want to lean into now is like, so, in speaking one other biblical principle, I think of Moses and Joshua. And in Numbers 27, it says, the Lord said to Moses, take Joshua, the son of Nun, with you, a man in whom is in the spirit, and lay your hand on him, set him before Eleazar the priest and before all the congregation, and inaugurate him in their sight. And you shall give some of your authority to him, that all the congregation, children of Israel, may be obedient. So, with that kind of like inauguration type of process, given the authority, bringing him before the people, let's talk about the transition. First, with you, Jose, into that CEO role. Like in that, maybe what's one thing that actually surprised you as you've made this transition into the CEO?
And by the way, that's the book that I'm reading right now. So Moses and Joshua. So it's crazy the timing of it. But I would and I'll answer the imposter syndrome second. I think that's an important. And what I would say to people that are contemplating the succession planning, because that's been part of the group, the C12 group that I'm here in Orlando. That's been a big conversation. I don't believe that there's a correct way to do this. There is I think to me, a wrong way to do it, and I'm gonna give you what Ron has done pretty well. He's backed off. Like I thought he was going to struggle with it, but he has backed off. And I don't have the sense today, or anyone in the company has the sense that I get to make 99.9 of the decisions. Right? Now, that doesn't mean that I don't keep Ron aware. It is my job to make sure Ron is not surprised, right? So he and I am extremely transparent with Ron. Now, there's a line that I don't cross: transparency and making my problem his problem. Because I try to separate those two things, right? So I would say how well he has transitioned. I would say how clear it is to everybody that it's me, right? That there's not, let's go ask Ron, let's go talk to Ron. And it doesn't matter if it's not the newest employee or somebody who's been with the company 30 years. And I feel that has to happen. Because if that doesn't happen, especially for those that are running a family type of business, and we just have to, like my C12 group was last Wednesday, and that was it. We had a family business, brothers, sisters, and where it wasn't, even though the brother was taken over, it wasn't clear that the brother was taken over, if that makes sense. And from that perspective, I don't see that working out. Now, how you go about it, so Ron backed off, I've been in charge. It wasn't something that I felt that I was ready for, because I've never looked for. So from feeling not ready, I'm super confident person, right? And I've been always super confident, but I'm also super, I'm going to go fix whatever I think I don't know, right? From that aspect of it. But I don't have to worry about making a mistake either, right? I know that I have Ron trusts me, right? As long as I don't make one of those core value mistakes, I don't have to worry about making a mistake. So I don't feel like I don't feel nervous or ashamed that I don't know the job. I don't know technology. No, I figure out how to talk about technology. I've never ran a technology department. Does that make sense? Right? I have never run a business development department. So from that perspective, that's provided a lot of comfort. Hopefully that answers the question.
Yeah, and then Ron?
Yeah, I just I have a different belief system, I think, than some of the purists. And that is I think organizational structures are historic in nature. And what I mean by that is I think what happens is somebody is doing a job they show that they can do more than that. So they actually start performing at the level above. And once you see them doing that really well, oftentimes you give them a promotion and call them that title that they've already been performing at.
Yeah.
And so because of that, with that mindset, I have a great guy who's good at finance, but he's so much better than just finance. I'm going to call him CFO. And then I've got a CFO who I start explaining some of the other problems to, and he starts telling me how to fix the operations and other things in that vein. And so realistically, I give him the rope to go out and solve those problems, and he starts doing it for a long time. And you know what happens? Some leader who's watched him literally run the company calls him out and says, "Congratulations, you're president." And then I watch him as president and I give him some of my responsibilities. A good example is, I start getting him involved in the political system with the congressmen and all of those kind of things, which were not really a president type thing, but it was more of a CEO's type stuff. I watched him constantly be in the job, doing well at the job that he is defined as, and then reaching for more and doing it well. By the time I called him CEO, he had already been CEO. And I had watched it and it performed well. If it didn't perform well, I wasn't going to probably call him that. But from a risk perspective, my risk is I just want the employees to be proud of where they're working and we're doing the right thing and we're helping the Defense Department. And so I can watch him expand beyond his current definition of roles and responsibilities. And then I look smart when I say, "Oh, I'm promoting him." Well, all I've done is watch history. And that's why some of the guys on the phone, I always am intimidated. My son even came to me and said, "Should I be involved in this company or whatever?" And for all the family-run businesses, my response was, "No." Uh, um, I've watched too many complex. All you got to do is sit down with John Neff or Dave Watkins, or there's just so many out there that I've seen the family complexities to. I didn't have a family member that I was morally responsible to give it to. What I had was a decision that I was morally responsible to find the best person for the employees that I served.
Mm.
And I think I did.
Yeah. So, Jose, going back to your theme of trust, with this transition, how easy have you seen it to be for the team to trust you as the CEO?
Yeah, that's gone pretty well. But I would go back to Ron backed off. So it was clear to the team that it was me. That also came with some changes that had to be made. So some of the changes were related to having the right skill sets, the right experience, but some of the other changes is saying, I'm never going to get that person on my side, right? It's never going to work. Yeah, that has been the easier part of this. I haven't encountered that. But again, it goes back to the aspect of setting expectations with everybody, making sure that everybody understands that you have a new person leading the company, that there's trust there. And if you hit those aspects, then I think everything else becomes easier from people following you. If you leave it halfway, it's like your kids, right? The kids, they'll know when mom and dad are not in agreement, and they'll milk it, right?
Yeah. So, to keep it like in terms of you and Ron at this point, what's your weekly, monthly type of interactions in terms of, do you guys have a set system? Or you still getting together? Obviously, what's that look like in terms of you guys' routine?
Once a week, but that once a week could be 2 times a week, 3 times a week. I know that if I need to get in touch with them, I can get in touch. Now, for the most part, there's been 2 or 3 weeks for a month where we don't talk. So the opposite is true. For the most part, I know I have him at least once a week. Actually, he and I are chatting right after this. So once a week, and I also know that I can pick up the phone and call. and he'll pick up the phone and call me. So that from that aspect, it's not a set in stone cadence.
Okay.
Yeah, I think my role right now, um, I guess it's always going to be dominated by being a majority owner, but my role right now is more to be a mentor. I realize that I think every entrepreneur has this issue. You grow up in the system when you're small and you take on responsibilities and then you build it up and it starts to grow and you start looking at, well, how can I get this growth to handle all these particular things? And the word delegate comes up and you start to struggle with delegate because you first delegate it and then they don't do it right. And so you can jump back in and solve it because you're the best at it, because you knew how to do it and you were doing it right. And that's what caused the growth. When you delegate, you have to assess what is the impact of you going back in to fix it. And the answer is it degrades every other employee's view of the person that you've been delegating to. And so um, an entrepreneur has to learn that lesson of number one, if you keep your fingers in the pie, then you can't even do your next job because you're back in the old thing and what you were trying to handle with the increased responsibilities in a bigger organization, you're no longer handling that as you drop back to do the other aspect. And when you do, you degrade morale or other things because other people watch you correct. So yeah, my approach is I trust him as he's talked a lot about. I believe it. I think in some cases he's going to make better decisions than I would. I think in a few cases there's a default on my side to kind of, oh, maybe, but then I catch myself. And in that scenario, the hour and a half or whatever that we spend, yeah, I would agree. We probably spend an hour and a half scheduled and another hour or two throughout the week, unscheduled or whatever. But that hour and a half that I am scheduled with him, that's more me mentoring than anything else. He's clarifying what's going on. He can ask questions if I can help or whatever else. And other times it's me just saying things about, well, for my career path, don't forget that. Or when he talked about getting rid of people and other aspects of it, that's the kind of thing where we would have a discussion of, yeah, I get that. And I understand why you want to do that. And I'm going to empower you to do that, but recognize there might be a ripple of what other people think of that individual and their support of them. So they're just healthy discussions between the two of us with nobody having a hardcore agenda, just trying to help each other.
Okay, so just one thing I'm taking away again, this whole theme of trust is Ron, the self-discipline you had to not jump back in when maybe things that Jose was leading didn't necessarily produce the intended results because you understood that if you do, you will destroy trust by the team and Jose because now you're coming back in to fix it. And so again, that ability, to have self-control. So just from a time check, we've got 15 minutes left. I don't have any questions in the chat right now, so I'm going to keep asking questions. If you have them, let me know and I can pause. But Ron, now you're the chairman of the board. You're not the CEO. Jose says you backed off. So what's been the hardest thing for you personally in this transition in terms of your day-to-day activities? And is there anything that really surprised you about this transition?
Yeah, I mean, there's a few things. I will go back up for just a second and say when I had the luxury of having somebody like him that could do stuff, I tried to go out and get myself better experienced or whatever. And so, number one, put yourself in a C12 group where you have the luxury of learning from a lot of people. And then number two, I also had the good fortune to get involved with Clay Mateel. Clay started with a 10-person company. He grew it, ended up taking ownership from the founder, and did this teeny little company called Imes Dog Food that he sold for $2.3 billion. And I just sat with him for hours and had the good fortune of listening to somebody way smarter, way more successful than I was or would ever be, and tried to learn lessons. And so early on in this conversation, Randy called out a book that Clay personally asked me to read. If you haven't read his book, it's a great book. But in addition to that, Finishing Big was a great thing for me because what happens to a lot of CEOs and owners of companies is they turn it over and then they're not happy. I think the particular Bo Burlington of this author, I think, interviewed something like 100 CEOs or owners of companies, and the whole idea was how did they end? Um, and you find out that probably 70 to 85% of them are unhappy. They've transitioned and they don't like it. Um, and that's mostly because they don't have a purpose anymore. Their purpose had been work or other things, etc. My purpose is way more trying to, I realize through C12 and other things that I'm just a steward of his resources and he is my purpose. And so in that scenario, it caused me to start working on more important things, a family foundation of trying to teach the generations after Sue and I what faith does to their lives and how they can positively impact other people. Um, there's a variety of those aspects. We've also, Jose's given me the luxury to enjoy the grandkids more. And some of those, I certainly believe the legacy will be to have them I one of my first grandchild is a handicapped young boy out of India who understands that through God's gift, he's in a scenario that's different than what was the default when he went into the orphanage the first week or whatever else. I think we have an incredible. Randy and others have taught me that the company really was a church to me, and I was trying to use it to help others, to keep them satisfied, etc. I've kind of turned that church over to Jose, and I'm moving on to my next church. And my next church, the Family Foundation and other aspects, allows me to do more charitable aspect and stuff like that. So I feel very busy. I'm still trying to work out those details or whatever else, so I can't say it's seamless. But I know through Clay, I could see that coming and try to prep for it.
Yeah. Yeah, we say we don't retire, we refire and repurpose, right? So we just
Right.
ask the Lord that next season. So um, for those, there's a lot of successors, I think, in terms of, not necessarily this what a success year. I don't know how the person, we don't have a lot of Jose's on the call. We got more Rons on the call. So what would be like Ron, your strongest word of exhortation regarding the implementation of this succession planning process? How soon should they be? Uh,
I don't think, and this kind of came from Clay or whatever, I don't think you have a robust business if you don't already have a succession plan, and I don't care how old you are. I think you have to have a plan for what you do because a business without a succession plan in mind is not, in my mind, a robust business because there's a clock. You're only going to make it so long. And if you haven't thought about what it is, whether you want to go out early, whether something personally happens, there's so many different scenarios that to ignore succession planning because you're in the heat of the battle is just not the right thing to do. And honestly, after going through this, I would have been working a succession plan in my 30s because now I realize now how important that is. In my 30s, I would have said, if I'm the right person to take a company from 1 million to 200 million, that doesn't mean I've got the right skills to take it from 200 million to 2 billion. People have talked about IPOs and other things, and I go, that's fine. We could consider an IPO as long as we fire me because I'm not capable of doing that. I've not got any life experience. There has to be somebody better. So succession planning isn't just that you retire. It could be that you get sick. It could be that something else happens to the company. It could be dramatic different things. And I just think it's really, really, really important to have the beginnings of a plan. I realize some plans need to be a little bit more matured than others because you may want to, somebody may want to get out in the next 2 years. Do you know what I mean?
Mhm.
But are you going to get out in the next 2 years and just assume that your single hire is going to work for your CEO or owner? Or are you going to back it up and try a few times and make sure you got the right one before you go forward? So again, I'll just emphasize you cannot think of this soon enough.
Okay. Jose, any words of exhortation on your end for those who are in this process and looking for somebody like you?
Yeah, well, a lot of thoughts. I'm trying to see how. So since I'm talking to owners here, I'm going to go back to trust. I'm going to go back to being clear on what the expectations are. Right? Although Ron has backed off, right? I know when I have to go talk to Ron. Right? Does that make sense? And I'll give you an example. Over the last several years, we've gone through a business model transformation. We're changing our value proposition. I'm sure Ron has talked to you about that.
Yeah.
That has required Ron's involvement. At times, just more that he's aware of what's going on. We've traveled together quite a bit, and he has listened to whether we're going in the right direction, we're not going in the right direction, right? And he's heard it from industry. So from that perspective, that has, at least if I look back, that has created trust, right? We're kind of seeing, we understand, we're on the same page from a market perspective, right? We might do things different on how to achieve that, right? For the most part, we're probably 80%, at least 80% connected. And that aspect of who you're going to go turn this over has to exist. I don't think you turn everything over where 100% that person is not communicating, 100% that person is just running it off. I don't think that exists because it's still your baby, right? There still has to be comfort. Ron and I have had the opportunity to do this over 7 years. I can see a scenario where some of you would have to go hire that person, right? And that might take 7 years, even if you turn the CEO title to make sure that it's going. So there might be a phase approach of that person and you gaining trust or giving up trust or working towards trust. So I mean, many different approach, but Ron and I are kind of cheating at this because we didn't start with this in mind. We've known each other, gained a lot of trust, and ultimately still talk to each other quite a bit. So has not been turned off the thing. Now, Ron doesn't, I'll tell you right now, a lot of times now I'm just telling Ron, hey, I did this, FYI, just in case. Or this week I was calling him because Bank of America, our bank, decided to reject a batch. It just happens to be our payroll batch the day before, right? So would I bug the chairman of the board owner? And that typically I don't accept. Can you imagine 400 some people upset the next day and the impact to the brand that would have? Because it's in the eyes of the beholder, right? That perception. Do they have financial issues? What happened, right? It never has happened, right? So I was calling Ron. He was in Bible study. Thankfully, by the time he was done, we had figured this out. Bank got their act straight. But we're not small, but I still did that because I didn't want him to be surprised. So I would expect those.
But I love that example, Jose, because that's a good way for Ron to solve problems. I get a text from Jose that says, "Call me." I send him back
please. I use please.
Yeah, that's true. I send him back a text that says, "I'm in adult Bible study with my wife. Do you want me to separate out?" And his response was, "Call me afterwards." So that Bible study is 2.5 hours long. And by the time I get done, the problem's solved. So, hey, sometimes you just get lucky and delegation works, right?
But by the way, I wasn't looking for Ron to solve the problem. But I wasn't going to wait until tomorrow morning for Ron to know it and have him find out through a bunch of angry employee calling him because he does have a personal relationship with a number of employees. So from that perspective, that builds trust because he knows he's not going to be surprised, right? So I think it's going to be a lot of that. I would sit here and tell you this is the way you do it. I'll tell you I'm wrong because there's just so many ways to do it. Ultimately, whoever you hire has to check certain boxes, right? I checked the finance boxes quite a bit. Then I showed something else, right? That gave Ron to believe. If I wouldn't have checked the boxes of finance, then it wouldn't have mattered. And I'm sure I'm not sure how many of you have somebody already in mind, or how many of you are going to go hire somebody. If you're going to go hire somebody, then I would say it's going to take a little while to trust, right? You're not going to give your baby up just to give your baby up.
And Randy, did you see the question in the chat?
Yeah, what do you think about that?
It's tough because I don't know what's delaying it. You can't, if you've got a succession plan, just like every other plan in the company, it has to adapt with other circumstances around you. So if it needs to be delayed, I'm not going to tell you that you don't delay it, but I'm going to say that's going to be a conscious decision. I mean, you can have environmental factors going on in a company or other things that create challenges where your original plan is no longer correct. But what I will say is if your original intent of succession planning is getting delayed, you still have to have the plan. You just adapt your plan to the environment you find yourself in. A perfect example is I'm going to create fake examples, but I've got the plan. I know it's going to be Jose, and all of a sudden Jose gets sick. No, you don't. In that scenario, you have to delay it, you have to adapt, etc. You'll find ways to adjust. But even when that occurs, there's still, even though the end result is getting delayed, there is still a plan. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And if something happened where what caused it to be delayed ends up coming up with something else that was different than what you expected, then maybe the plan gets revised so much that it's not just a time delay, it's an actual change to the end result or whatever else. But you still constantly have to have a plan. So I don't know if that answers Joe's question or not.
Well, hopefully it does because we're down to the 2 minute warning. So,
Can I add a comment on that real quick?
yes, yep.
So the way that it kind of makes sense to me and the way that the board puts a lot of pressure is just how to business continuity, right? And in order to operate your business, forget about succession planning for a second. In order to operate your business, accountants, sales manager, repair managers, right? Who steps up? And if you go through that process and build it in and out, there's a very formal way to do this. There's the hybrid. There's this, I'm just going to do it this way because that's all I have. So there's many ways to do it, but eventually you want to start formalizing it throughout your organization. And it's going to become obvious that maybe it's your area that doesn't have a piece. I would say, I don't think Ron and I ever touched this. We really didn't touch it until it became obvious. I don't know, 2 years ago, Ron, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
But we never touched it. I didn't bring it up. He didn't bring it up. It wasn't something that I can honestly say that it was planned until 2 years ago.
Right. And part of that is I wasn't going to commit that that was the end result until I had a little bit more data to show that his performance was going to nail it.
Great. There's questions in the chat about whether I'll send out the link when this recording's completed. And also, I'm going to send out a segment we did back in October of 23 in C12 that actually has a little homework regarding succession. There's a couple of videos you need to watch and fill in the blanks with Peter Greer, who wrote a few books. One of the books is Mission Drift, which I would recommend. He also wrote a book called Succession by Peter Greer. It's an excellent resource as you're thinking through this. So let me wrap us up in prayer and we will get on with the rest of our day. Lord, I thank you for these men and what you are doing and the lives that are being impacted in and through FTI for your glory. And we just pray you continue your work. For those on this call, Lord, you know who needs to be the next leader of these organizations. And we just pray, Lord, that you would thrust laborers into the harvest that you know you have and give us the discernment to know who you have your hand upon. We ask it in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen.
All right.
Thank
Thanks
you,
for
everyone.
attending and hope to see you soon.
Thank you.
you.